Path of Exile 1 is the greatest ARPG of all time, at least in my opinion. When it comes to their crafting, the endgame bosses, all of the different seasonal updates that they have done that are still relevant in the game today, the immense amount of content that Path of Exile has to offer, the build diversity within the game, all of this combines to by far make the most in-depth and, in my opinion, best ARPG experience for the genre of players that it's set out for. Even the developers of the game have continuously proved to be the best within this genre, giving the players not only a lot of times what they want, but also making good decisions on what the players actually need to make the game good, understanding the game better a lot of times than the players themselves do, which is not something you can say for a lot of developers in the industry today. And after over a decade of playing the original game, they are now nearing the release of the early access for Path of Exile 2, which looks absolutely incredible. But before we get into why I think Path of Exile 2 is going to be incredible and going to be the best version of Path of Exile moving forward, thank you guys so much for over 800 subscribers. I really want to hit 900 by the end of the week. That's my goal. So if you're new to the channel, you like gaming news and gaming reviews, specifically with RPGs and action adventure type of games, please subscribe and like the video. If you like the video, it really helps me out. Now let's get into the content. So I do want to preface my thoughts and what we've seen from Path of Exile 2 so far with I am somebody and I am a player who quit Diablo 4 after putting a ton of hours into that game and enjoying it for what it was, but not being someone who really was able to be engaged for the long term or even for a lot of future seasons. Even though I have returned back and tried to play the game, it never really gripped me the way it did when it first launched and I experienced it for the first time. I've also played the living hell out of Last Epoch and really enjoyed what that had to offer, and I loved how it wasn't as complex as the original Path of Exile and something that I could dive into without looking up a build guide and still making something that I genuinely thought was very overpowered and had a lot of fun with the game and pretty much cleared all the content that the game had to offer. Because I'm also somebody that doesn't love how in-depth Path of Exile 1 is, even though I know that is why this is the best version of ARPGs out today, because people that play ARPGs a lot of times love how in-depth it is and love the different systems in the game and how deep they actually are. But for me, someone who doesn't necessarily always love to find a build guide and doesn't like to brick my character and restart without looking up a build guide, I'm excited for something that is a little bit more closer to Last Epoch, which does have some depth to it, but isn't as, simple as Diablo, for example, but isn't as complex as the original Path of Exile, which I definitely think they're aiming to do for Path of Exile 2, and that's one of the reasons I'm so excited for it, and I really think a lot of more casual and non-hardcore ARPG players are going to enjoy this game on top of all of the hardcore ARPG players that have been playing Path of Exile 1 for over a decade now. So first I want to start off with the classes here, because the classes that they have shown so far look absolutely insane, and there's obviously more here than from Path of Exile 1 in some of the most unique classes I have ever seen within ARPGs. So your base classes are going to be the Warrior, the Huntress, Sorceress, Mercenary, Monk, Druid, Marauder, Ranger, Witch, Duelist, Shadow, and Templar. So yes, that is going to be 12 base classes within Path of Exile 2, which is insane. I believe that's the most that we've ever seen in an ARPG before. And then on top of this, each of these is obviously going to break up in multiple Ascendancies as well, coming to a total of like 24 total classes. And like I mentioned, the ones they have shown so far, I want to highlight a few here in a second, have been absolutely insane and have looked so damn cool and more unique, again, than anything I've seen within the genre to this date. So for the first class that I wanted to highlight here is the Chronomancer, and the Chronomancer is an ascendancy of the Sorceress class, so you'll unlock that obviously when you ascend that base class. And this one looks absolutely awesome and is probably going to be the one that I start playing off as, at least within the early access period, because the main goal and the main gameplay style style of this class is to manipulate time. You can completely freeze time. You can also go back in time and regen your health and obviously teleport to where you were at that point in time. And overall, this class just looks something very unique that we haven't seen in the ARPG. It kind of looks like the new classes within World of Warcraft with the augmentation, where you can kind of manipulate time to do different healing and things like that, but obviously within an ARPG. And I think that looks so damn cool, and it's something that I am very interested in just off the gate from what they've shown. And other than the Chronomancer, they've shown some really damn awesome ones too. For example, with the Witch, you can be a Infernalist or you can be a Blood Mage. With the Blood Mage, every enemy that they kill drops a vial of blood, and all of their abilities use both mana and their own health. With the Infernalist, you run around with a Hellhound and other minions as well, catch everybody on fire, and can even turn into a legitimate demon. The Monk even looks really damn cool, and I hate monks in most games, but the Monk has two different ascendancies as well that they have shown. One being an Invoker, which pretty much is Aang the Avatar from The Last Airbender. You can use all the different elements and turn into a legitimate avatar to do even more damage and embrace all of the different elements. You can also be an Acolyte of Chayula, I believe that's how you pronounce it, and this is basically going into the dark side of the monk and completely changing your resource to like a dark spirit type of resource, which seems damn awesome. It's kind of like a Jedi dichotomy between like the good and the bad monk. And obviously there's more that they've shown here, but these are a couple that I think look really awesome. And overall, you're going to have 36 different ascendancies to choose from between your 12 base classes that all look extremely unique from each other. Now, aside from the ascendancies and the classes, I want to move on to some things that I think Path of Exile is doing really well for new players. And the first thing is the new system with the active skill gems, which you now equip to your character in a separate interface instead of equipping to your gear. So you no longer have to find specific slots on each piece of gear or specific links to make all of your gems work together and all of your skills work together, which is now going to also enable you to find gear that you actually want to use that has good bonuses, but it might not have those specific links or those specific slots for you to equip active gems to. So now you are just going to be able to equip them to your character and be able to use those abilities and not have to worry about that with gear, which is awesome. And this, I think, is so much more, not necessarily casual friendly, but overall just a better system and a more understanding system for newcomers, but also something I think hardcore players of this game are going to appreciate as well. I think the system as a whole is just better, but on top of this, you're also going to be equipping support gems onto your different abilities, and these support gems are going to drastically change the way your abilities work. Not only by just doing things like more damage, for example, but they've already shown something like a projectile support ability that's going to enable a projectile ability to shoot out more projectiles, and this can be moved between any ability that you think it's going to work with. Now, aside from both the support gems as well as the active skill gems, you are going to have your classic Path of Exile skill tree, which offers billions of different options to go. It's the biggest skill tree in any game that's pretty much ever been created, and a lot of people love it for that. But in this game, they are streamlining this skill tree to be a lot more understanding for newer players coming into the game or coming into the genre as a whole, making the different connections between the points a lot more clear and a lot more obvious when you're doing it. All of the points within this, at least close to your initial class within the tree, are going to all be pretty beneficial to your character, and you can also refund these for gold at pretty much any time when you're in a town, which is something that you couldn't do in the previous games. If you fucked this up, you could refund it with certain refund points, but it wasn't as streamlined and it wasn't as simple of just doing it for gold, which is something that I am very appreciative of, and it helps a lot of people not break their character when they get to the end and realize that they have made all of these wrong choices. This was one of the biggest things they could do, and they did it, and I'm very appreciative of the team for doing this for newcomers into the series. So now I want to move on to another system that I think they are making a lot more approachable and a lot more streamlined for newcomers coming into the game, but also another system that I think hardcore fans are going to appreciate the changes of, and that is the itemization, because the items that you're going to find and the itemization in the system as a whole has changed from Path of of Exile 1. In Path of Exile 2, the items are going to have slots on them for different gems, but these are going to be for passives, like resistances, for example. With some main hand weapons, you can have 2 on, and then some other pieces of armor, you can maybe only have 1 on, for example. But these are going to be able to get you resistances or different passive bonuses that are going to help you obviously push endgame, or different things that you might not have gotten in your skill tree. On top of this, all of the items are obviously going to have modifiers on them, with rare items having up to 6 modifiers that are going to buff up your character or buff specific abilities, etc. We've seen that in pretty much every ARPG before, but I think this system where you don't have to actually equip the active gems or the passive gems to boost your active abilities onto gear is going to enable you to find gear that you want to use a lot more often. On top of this, they are making acquiring gear a lot easier in terms of actual upgrades for your character. So first off, just in terms of acquiring gear, the gear out in the world is going to be better for your character a lot more often. Not only are they increasing the frequency, but again, as I mentioned, you don't have to worry about the different links between gear when you actually get it. You can just pick up that gear and use it and still use all of the skills that you were using previously, which is going to allow you to find gear that you want and can use a lot more often. On top of this, from the vendors, they're going to have better gear more frequently as well, with all of the different gear within these vendors restocking every level. You obviously also have the gambling vendor. If you don't see a specific piece of gear that you want from the other vendors, you can then go and gamble for a type of gear, and all of the modifiers are going to be random when you pick that up, as well as the rarity. On top of this, none of the gear is bound to you, so you can always trade this when you want. The only thing that is bound to you is gold. And aside from this, you can also do a currency exchange for different things like gold for upgrade materials, for example. You can salvage or disenchant all of your gear as well for upgrade materials, and then use those materials to add more modifiers, to add other slots for the passive gems that you can put on your different gear, and overall just make your gear stronger as a whole. And then you're obviously going to have your big unique pieces of gear as well, and this is going to be potentially build or character defining for you if you go and get the right one. I think this system as a whole makes a lot more sense and is a lot more streamlined than the first game, specifically for me, someone who hasn't played as much as some of the really hardcore players, and especially when I first started playing Path of Exile, was very confused and bricked a lot of items and bricked a lot of characters by not understanding it fully. So lastly here, I want to move on to the end game and some of the different specific gameplay loops you're going to have aside from the main campaign and the acts that you're going to move through, because the end game in ARPGs is why people play the game. Pushing your character to the limits and getting as strong as you possibly can and fighting the hardest enemies you can and one-shotting them is the fun of a lot of ARPGs, and obviously Path of Exile has always had the best end game comparatively to the other games, specifically because not only has it been around for so damn long, but because the end game was such a great system. Now in this game, the Atlas is the big end game system that you're going to be progressing through, and it's pretty much a giant map with different places that you can go that are all linked to each other. So you pretty much start at one and you keep moving on, and you use something called a waypoint to unlock that area. And these areas are going to be very distinct from the original areas you went through in the campaign, with completely different enemies and effects within that specific map that you can go into, and will completely change the gameplay for each different location that you go within the Atlas. To complete one of these maps, you're going to have to kill all of the elite or boss type enemies, and if you lose, you have to go back to the Atlas and find a different way around for the different points that are connected to get to where you want to go. And all of these maps are going to have different things within them to also farm specific types of loot, like a strongbox, for example, that you can use crafting materials to make sure drops the best type of loot, or potentially the right type of loot that you're actually looking for. There's also frozen enemies that you can unfreeze that are going to drop specific types of loot as well that it'll show you before you unfreeze them, and there's going to be many other things as well within these maps that are going to help you farm a specific type of item, or just change up how some of these maps work. Now on top of this, all of the different waypoints that you use to unlock these maps are also going to have different modifiers on them. With the harder maps that you beat, you're going to be getting better waypoints or crafting better waypoints to have more modifiers for harder maps but better gear that you get from these maps. You're also going to be getting skill points for a completely separate skill tree called the Atlas skill tree that you're going to use to obviously improve maps, improve the different loot that you get within them and craft your experience to make sure you're getting the best stuff for your character. And if this wasn't enough, there's also cities you can find in the Atlas that are going to have specific items. There are different realm gates that they haven't explored yet, but they said we're going to figure out what they are used for when we actually play the game. You're going to even be able to find maps within the entire Atlas system that you can take out and use as your own home base, similar to what we saw in Path of Exile 1. So overall, this Atlas system seems pretty straightforward, but also very deep, and seems like it's going to be something that players are going to put hundreds of hours into, continuously progress, get these different locations to make their base of operations, make harder and harder and harder, get better and better in loot, and just something that I think is going to be really great for the main endgame progression of Path of Exile. And in addition to all of the endgame with the Atlas system, you're also going to have revamped and brought back League mechanics from Path of Exile 1. These are going to include Breach, Ritual, Delirium, as well as Expedition. And then in addition to this, you're also going to have endgame trials aside from the trials that I spoke about previously when you're doing your Ascendancies. And these trials are going to push you to later floors with different bosses on each floor with its own progression system as well, very similar to what we've seen in other progression systems for the different maps, etc. And on top of this, you're going to be able to get jewels that you're going to socket into your passive skill tree that are going to provide a radio bonus for all of the different skills or passive skills that you choose within that skill tree to make you even stronger. And no, I'm still not done talking about the end game because there is still even more here. You're going to have your big Pinnacle boss and the Uber bosses for the lead up to that Pinnacle boss. And this is going to take place within the Atlas system. You're going to see a big tower come up within the Atlas system with some mazes. You're going to go around and kill all the different faction Uber bosses. And once you kill them, they are going to now enable you to fight the main boss. But if you don't kill them and you die, they're going to move on and you're going to have to find them at a later time somewhere else within the Atlas. And this is obviously going to be the ultimate and hardest challenges within Path of Exile as a whole. And yes, this is going to also come with another skill tree. So there is a ton of shit here. They haven't even shown all of it, but everything they have shown looks absolutely incredible. And they've done such a good job, at least in my opinion, streamlining the game and a lot of the systems and making it more, at least easier to understand for a lot of casual players or newcomers into Path of Exile, and also still maintaining that depth and complexity for hardcore players or big fans of the original game. And I cannot wait to get my hands on this game and play it for the first time in the early access that is releasing on December 5th. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I would love to hear down in the comments what you guys think about Path of Exile 2. Are you excited for it? Do you like a lot of the changes that they made, or are you more still going to be interested in Path of Exile 1 and you don't necessarily like a lot of the changes they made? I would like to hear down below in the comments. Like this video if you liked the video and subscribe for more. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!